completely sums up the strategy and the need now just as we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Now is the moment when it's vital that we concentrate on the road ahead. Don't veer off one way or the other, and do not allow ourselves to throw away the gains that we've made. It will be a tough few months, but the vaccines that he talks about have unquestionably changed the logic, changed massively improved our position. But it's too early, far too early to be complacent about that. But obviously, I thank the company and his constituency profoundly for what they've done.
Daniel Zeichner.
The Prime Minister failed to answer the question from the Leader of the Opposition about the extent to which local areas would be consulted on which tier they would be returned to, and the Secretary of State was fantastically vague about the geography of any such areas. So can the Prime Minister clarify what exactly are the criteria that are going to be used to make these decisions?
Prime Minister.
Well, with great respect to the honourable gentleman, perhaps that was one of the answers I gave that was mysteriously truncated in the course of my giving it. But I think I said pretty clearly that the criteria we'd use to decide who went into which tier would be case detection rates in all groups, case detection rates in the over 60s, the rate at which cases are rising or falling, positivity rates and pressure on the NHS. So those are some of the criteria that we will use.
Sir Desmond Swain.
He loved Big Brother. Madam Deputy Speaker, the last ruler that told us how we may or may not celebrate Christmas was Oliver Cromwell. It didn't end well, did it?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend is completely right in his basic instincts, which I share, and his fundamental libertarian yearnings, which I also share. And I love Christmas. I love a big get together. I think the trouble is that the people of this country can see that there is a real risk that if we blow it at Christmas with a big blowout Christmas, then we'll pay for it in the new year. And they want a cautious and balanced approach, and that's what we will deliver for the whole UK.
Can I make a plea to all members to be as brief as the right honourable gentleman for New Forest West, because after 2 hours we're not even halfway through the number of people who are here hoping to ask questions in this statement. And can I just remind people that they're not making speeches, they're asking questions, brief questions, and they shouldn't read them. And I'm quite sure I can rely on the right honourable member for Rhondda. Chris Bryant.
You always say that before you call me, Madam Deputy Speaker. So you've united the House in that plea as well. Can I just make a plea to the Prime Minister? I've asked him about this before this year. We had terrible flooding in the Rhondda. It led to a landslide from a coal tip, which could all too easily have landed on top of people's houses, or, God forbid, as it has elsewhere in the past in Wales. We need £100 million. So far, the Prime Minister has promised one member of this House to passport the money in February. He promised me in June that this was going to be sorted. We've still only seen £2 million of the £100 million we need. Please, 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 just say now we're going to get that money on Wednesday.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a matter for the Welsh Labour government in Wales to deal with, but I also understand the fundamental inability of the Welsh Labour government to deal with so many matters that concern the people of Rhondda, and we will do what we can to address the right honourable gentleman's point.
Richard Graham.
Speaker, many will be relieved that collective worship, outdoor sports, gyms, shops and personal care will resume business as usual. But can the Prime Minister tell us when the limits for spectators at spectator sports and business events will be set, because this will affect many self-employed contractors? And most importantly, what does my right honourable friend think of the chances of getting the over 80s and most vulnerable vaccinated before Christmas, so that that great festival can be a lot more stressful for everyone? A lot less stressful for everyone.
Just while the Prime Minister computes what that question actually was, I should point out, and I'm being kind to the honourable gentleman because he is an honourable gentleman, but he's had 2 questions. I'm not allowing any more 2 questions. It's 1 question, not a speech, or we'll be here all day. Of course, some people want to be. Prime Minister.
Yes, I'm interested in the Freudian slip from my honourable friend about Christmas, but the answer is I'm afraid that it is just too early to say whether we'll get any vaccine before Christmas that we can deploy at scale. We're optimistic, but we can't be confident at this stage.
Now to Edinburgh, to Christine Jardine.
Madam Deputy Speaker, regardless of today's announcement, so many businesses and people in my constituency of Edinburgh West and across this country are still completely excluded and have been for many months from government support. So can the Prime Minister assure us that his government will address the issue of those millions of people who have been excluded?
Prime Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we hope that nobody has been excluded, and there's a massive package of support and Barnett consequentials for Scotland running to many billions. So 13.5 billion for the self-employed alone.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I know that the whole House will want to join with me in sending our condolences and our thoughts to the 2 crew members of the Joanna C that sank at sea this weekend. If I might ask the Prime Minister with regards to the announcement that he's made today, will he be making the desire to put the level R1 level as a time-specific objective or a permanent one?
Prime Minister.
Well, obviously, and I echo very much his tribute to the sailors lost at sea. And my honourable friend is right to focus on the R. We want to get it down and keep it down if possible for good.
Swansea to Geraint Davis.
Madam Deputy Speaker, Wales is already out of its successful circuit breaker. So when England comes out of lockdown into a tiered system, will the Prime Minister ensure that people who live in Tier 2 and Tier 3 are not in a position to travel with non-essential travel out of those regions, into English regions and into Wales, in order to contain the spread of the transmission of the disease?
He should study that. If he looks at the guidance on Tier 2, on travel in Tier 2 and in Tier 3, he'll see it's set out very clearly there that in Tier 2 you should reduce the number of journeys you make to avoid travelling into Tier 3 areas, and in Tier 3 you should avoid travelling out of the area altogether. But there's more detail in the guidance that he might care to study.
Speaker, and we welcome the changes today to gyms, God and golf, opening in all tiers. But can the Prime Minister just confirm to me that the hospitality sector, forced to close in Tier 2 and 3 areas, will continue to receive grant support in the future?
Minister.
Yes, indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I can tell my honourable friend that local restrictions support grants are still available, £3,000 for every 28 days a business is forced to close.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Under the previous tiering system, my constituents in Lancaster and Wyre have been frustrated that although they have infection rates at the bottom of the Lancashire table of infections, they are bound by the rest of the county when it comes to that tiering system. So can the Prime Minister reassure my constituents and businesses who operate in my constituency that district councils will be taken into account and consulted when it comes to deciding which tiers we're going into?
Prime Minister.
I very much sympathise with her constituents in Lancaster, and where I thank them for the efforts that they've gone to help bring the virus down in their area. It's very difficult, as I was saying earlier on, to draw up the boundaries of these regions in a way that is satisfactory. But what I hope is that people will work together to get the test, to kick COVID out and reduce the virus, to drive down the virus, and thereby to hopefully to reduce the restrictions in their area.
Craig Whittaker.
Speaker, can my honourable friend tell us exactly what the criteria will be for moving up and down the tiered system and how often a review for each area will take place?
Minister.
Yes. Yes, Madam Deputy, the criteria, as I've set out, I think, a couple of times now, and they will be reviewed every 14 days.
Mary Kelly-Foy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. While the Prime Minister might hope that coronavirus take the day off this Christmas, key workers in prisons, local authorities and emergency services will be working hard to keep vital services running. Despite this, the Chancellor is apparently set to freeze their pay. Will the Prime Minister order the Chancellor to reverse this decision, or do key workers need to set up unproven PPE companies if they want to receive government money?
Minister.
Well, I thank prison workers and all who have done an incredible job in fighting COVID, helping us as a country to fight COVID over the last few months. I do think the public understand the need to keep the pressure down on public spending at the moment. We've had inflation-busting pay rises previously, but as the Chancellor will be setting out, the economic situation is not easy as a result of what this country has been going through. But what we will ensure is that prison workers are amongst the very first to be able to use the lateral flow testing system to help them get the virus down in their line of work.
Harlow to Rob Halfon.
Speaker, I strongly support what the Prime Minister has said today, and he will know that despite the strong financial support for businesses, that in my constituency of Harlow, many businesses have really struggled. So as well as paying tribute to Harlow small businesses, could I just urge him to ensure that he takes into consideration the really tough, sometimes devastating effects on small businesses in future decisions on COVID?
Minister.
Him for what he does to champion small businesses in Harlow. They're the backbone of our economy. The government, that's why the government has done everything we can to keep businesses going. The furlough system, the grants of £3,000 per month for businesses forced to close, backdated grants for businesses in tiers 2 and 3 that have been affected by reduced demand. I mentioned earlier to another honourable member the support for local authorities for business. That's about 1.1 billion out of the 4.6, and he'll have heard me mention many times the reductions in business rates and VAT, which go on until next year, and plenty of schemes for loans and grants to help small business. That investment now will be repaid, I've no doubt, by growth and dynamism next year as those businesses bounce back.
We now go to Bill Esterson.
The Prime Minister said that he plans to extend mass testing. 2,000 military personnel were needed to deliver mass testing in Liverpool, and they weren't able to extend it to the rest of the 5 boroughs in the city region. They're now due to return to other duties. Meanwhile, other public sector workers are flat out on the crisis already. So what's the plan for rolling out mass testing? And wouldn't it be better to concentrate on getting contact tracing right?
Prime Minister.
The advantage of mass testing is that it's instant, and contact tracing by any system takes 24 hours or so to get you the result. Mass testing can tell you whether you're infectious or not within 15 minutes. The Army have done a fantastic job in Liverpool, and they'll continue to be very valuable as we roll it out.
Alan Cairns.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister has given a clear policy direction together with the rationale behind the changes about to be introduced. People will be particularly pleased that spectators can return to sporting events. Will my right honourable friend share the scientific evidence and thinking behind this with the Welsh Government in the hope that my constituents can benefit from the same privileges that will be available in England?
Yes. Yes, indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. We'll share all the relevant scientific evidence with my right honourable friend in the House.
David Linden.
you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Show people who run our fairs and showgrounds have been adhering to lockdown rules since March, but because they don't have fixed premises, they're not eligible for rates relief or indeed many other aspects of financial support. So will the Prime Minister agree to meet with myself and the Showmen's Guild to look at how we can support people who run our fairs and showgrounds?
Hear, hear.
Prime Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, you have to forgive me. I think that was a request to meet the honourable gentleman, and I'm very happy to make sure that his request is taken up at the appropriate ministerial level. I think it was about support for those who have suffered during lockdown. I'm more than happy to do what I can to help.
And now we go to Bill Wiggin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to thank Tom Keith-Roach and AstraZeneca for producing a vaccine that, when fairly compared, is actually 90% effective. And so will my right honourable friend revisit the restrictions he's proposing today if the vaccine is approved in the coming days?
Prime Minister.
Friend, and he's absolutely right to be optimistic about the AstraZeneca vaccine. I think the trouble is that it may not be deployed or indeed deployable in a rapid enough timescale to allow us to dispense with the kind of restraints that we need to employ. The risk is that we would simply see a surge in the virus and a devastating impact on communities before we've got those shots into people's arms.
Twist.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituents in Blaydon, along with others across the North East, have been working really hard to stop the spread of coronavirus, and our councils have responded magnificently too. But questions still remain about the funding for the more effective local test and trace, additional support for businesses already in Tier 2 or 3 before the shutdown, and funding for the local rollout of the vaccination programme. Will the Prime Minister ensure that funding is now made available urgently to local authorities to meet these costs?
Prime Minister.
Indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, we will make sure that we support local authorities who will clearly be playing an important role in rolling out the vaccine. As I said, we've already given £4.5 billion, 4.6 billion to support local authorities. They will continue to play a crucial role, as will the NHS, the Army and other bodies.
Davison.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm incredibly grateful to the Prime Minister for sticking to his word and ending the national lockdown on the 2nd of December as promised. But looking ahead to the new tiered system, I've been speaking to hospitality businesses today who very much welcome the changes to the curfew, but just want the Prime Minister's reassurance that additional support packages will remain in place if they are to go into Tier 2 or 3.
Prime Minister.
Yes, I thank my honourable friend. She's entirely right to support the hospitality industry in her community, and of course support product packages will remain in place.
Now we go to Birmingham, to Liam Byrne.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. On Friday, I met with online nurses with Birmingham who said they've never seen so much death on the wards. They've had to bid goodbye to colleagues who have left the hospital in hearses. Many are suffering from PTSD. We owe it to them to play by the rules to save our NHS. But we've got to save livelihoods too. Now, I've read the action plan the Prime Minister's published. There's one mention of the self-employed on page 39, but in the West Midlands, half of the self-employed aren't eligible for the government support scheme. That's 121,000 people. Now, they're not going to be helped by VAT cuts or bounce back loans or the art and culture scheme. What they need is eligibility for the self-employment scheme. So will the Prime Minister bring forward changes to this scheme, or is he hell-bent on starving our entrepreneurs this Christmas?
Prime Minister.
Of course not, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I feel very much for those who are in a difficult position. We've spent £13.5 billion supporting the self-employed so far. I think possibly more by now, and universal credit remains there. The increase in universal credit is also intended to help those in tough times, as well as all the other provision that I've mentioned. But the best thing we can do for all self-employed people is to get our communities, get our country moving again. And I think that this winter package offers the best way forward.
Kruger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. A localised tiered approach is definitely the best way forward, and in Wiltshire we very much look forward to going back into what I hope will be the lowest level of restrictions. But can my right honourable friend commit to publishing very clear indicators so that local leaders know what they need to do in order to exit down the tiers and eventually get out of the restrictions altogether?
Minister.
Thank my honourable friend. He'll have seen or heard, I think, several times now the criteria we're using to decide which tiers people should go into. The inverse is obviously true, and everybody now has several exit routes. So at least one. There's the vaccine. There's obeying the tiering system scrupulously, but there's also the possibility now of mass testing. Get a test. As a community, kick COVID out and reduce the restrictions you face.
Now we go to Vicky Foxcroft.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On the 12th of October, I asked the Prime Minister if he would ensure British Sign Language was available at future press conferences. He said, the point is registered but not delivered. 6 weeks since that question, 8 months since the start of the pandemic, still no progress on a sign language interpreter. So I asked the Prime Minister, will he meet with me and others who rely on sign language interpretation to work out a solution so government communication is inclusive of all disabled people?
And I certainly will make sure that her delegation is properly received, and we try to come up with a solution.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Prime Minister, you will know more than anyone else in this House that London is a wonderful, diverse city, and many Londoners tonight will be welcoming much of your statement. But we're not a single homogeneous unit. So can I have your reassurance that when considering the tier system, you will look at the regulations, consider London borough by borough, and not treat us all as one unit?
Prime Minister.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, alas, the virus is no respecter of borough boundaries, as I understand things, and London is, of course, my honourable friend is totally right in his analysis. The incidence is different in different parts of the city, but there are many things which unite London and encourage transmission across its vast network. And I'm afraid that's still, the most sensible way of dealing with it.
Now we go to Barbara Keeley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. People living in care homes need visitors. The plans to test family members so that they can visit are welcome, but there's a big issue with insurance and the need for care homes to have indemnity if they experience a COVID outbreak after visits. Now, care homes are already struggling financially and they should not be left facing ruinous legal fees because they tried to do the right thing and facilitate safe visits. So will the Prime Minister commit to extending the indemnity to care homes, which the NHS already has, plus financial support to help the care sector pay for spiralling insurance premiums?
Prime Minister.
Deputy Speaker, I'll certainly study the suggestion that she makes, but the best way forward is for care homes to take advantage of the testing system that we have in place, not just lateral flow, but PCR testing as well. That's the way that to check that your employees aren't spreading it, and of course to stop employees going from care home to care home, as been pointed out throughout this pandemic. Very often it's not the visitors, it's not the family members who are importing the disease. Alas, I'm afraid sometimes it's the disease moving from care home to care home and through employees, and we've got to stop that as well.
James Sunderland.
Madam Deputy Speaker, international travel is vital for our recovery, not least in the aviation, hospitality, leisure and business sectors. Could I please ask the Prime Minister if he's given any thought to the utility of having vaccination stamps in passports or an equivalent scheme to get our planes off the ground?
Yeah.
Prime Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I can assure my honourable friend that the Secretary of State for Transport is looking at all such schemes, and I'm sure he'll have heard what my honourable friend has said loud and clear, and he'll be making some announcements very shortly.
Munira Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Today's COVID winter plan confirms a further £7 billion for test and trace, taking the full bill this year to some £22 billion. Could the Prime Minister confirm how much of this additional funding will be going to the highly effective local authority contact tracing teams? How much will be squandered on management consultants and Serco's failed national contact tracing system? And how much will go on further supporting those asked to self-isolate?
Prime Minister.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I can't give her the breakdown of the figures now, but what I can certainly tell her is that actually NHS Test and Trace has been working hand in glove with local authorities from the beginning. And there are, to the best of my knowledge, about 198 local authority testing teams now actively going out there and doing what's necessary. And they're doing a fantastic job.
Edward Timson.
Thank you much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Dr. Andrew Wilson and the Cheshire Clinical Commissioning Group have done a great job maintaining a high standard of care for patients alongside their COVID workload. So can my right honourable friend reassure Dr. Alistair Adey at the Tarpley Health Centre that additional support will be made available to GP practices so they can continue to deliver that standard alongside any vaccination programme?
Prime Minister.
Yes, absolutely. The GPs generally, and I thank Dr. Andrew Wilson, the Cheshire Clinical Commissioning Group, for everything they've done, and Dr. Alistair Adey from the Tarpley Health Centre. The GPs will obviously play a crucial role in this vaccination programme, as they do in all vaccination programmes, and they've been backed with £150 million to prepare.
Going to Glasgow to Carol Monaghan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Household mixing is a major vector for COVID. So unless the Prime Minister has negotiated a ceasefire with the virus, the only mixing we should be considering over the next 6 weeks are our Christmas drinks. So does the Prime Minister actually have an exit strategy, or is he content to accept a certain level of risk through household mixing?
Prime Minister.
Speaker, we think that we've been able to get the virus down and to get it down through a tiered system, as she knows, and we're going to continue to do that. The guidance about the number of people you're allowed to mix with is in households is very clear, and it will remain, alas, it will remain very tough, and it will remain tough because that's the way to get through beyond Christmas, through the new year. And the exit strategy is very simple. It's to use these three techniques: tough tiering, mass testing, and the rollout of the vaccine to keep the virus down and to push it down further until such time as we're able to say that all those who are vulnerable have been vaccinated, and we can move forward and go back completely to normal. And there's several colleagues have, as has been pointed out several times already, that terminus, that end date, looks like being Easter. We may be able to do better before Easter, may be able to make considerable improvements before Easter, but we should aim for Easter.
Steve Bryan.
On the 2nd of November, I asked the Prime Minister what he felt we've learnt in the summer, and after the end of the first lockdown, and he said that I think we should have, when people were contacted, tested positive, they isolated, and he said it doesn't look to me as though the numbers or the proportions have been good enough. We need to get these up in the next phase. I wonder if he could update me on that, because yes, the mass testing is critical and the vaccine may well save us, but there is going to be a gap between certainly the first and the last, and I just wonder if he could update me.
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend is absolutely right that has been a problem. In fact, more people have been self-isolating than I think is sometimes supposed or alleged, and they've done a great thing. We've instituted the payments to help support those who are doing it, means-tested payments. But I think what will really change it now is the lateral flow tests, which will, we hope, enable you to have a shorter period of quarantine, so you don't have to stick for the full 14 days, but you can get a rapid turnaround test, a lateral flow test, after a much shorter period, and that's what we're aiming for.
Now we go to Margaret Greenwood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The government has failed to make provision for the delivery of remote education to pupils who live in a household where someone is clinically extremely vulnerable. A number of my constituents are suffering extreme anxiety as a result, as they do their very best to keep their families safe, and some are even considering homeschooling, despite the fact their children love their schools. So will the Prime Minister respond to their concerns and make sure that in his new guidance he makes sure no family is put under unnecessary stress in this way?
Minister.
All the parents who are coping with exceptionally difficult circumstances, trying to do their best for their kids when it is very stressful, and they have the difficulties to knowing whether to send them to school or not. It's much better to send them to school if you possibly can. We distributed, I think, hundreds of thousands of laptops to help pupils learn remotely throughout the summer, and we continue to support catch up and top up learning for vulnerable kids, particularly via one-on-one tuition. I want to see every child supported, and that applies, as she rightly says, to the children of families that are facing particular difficulties.
Dr. Ben Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I very warmly welcome the announcement of the end of national lockdown on the 2nd of December. This morning I had discussions with school leaders in Runnymede and Weybridge regarding the challenges they face, and a key message was that our schools are open, but too many pupils are self-isolating at home. Whole year groups being sent home following a case, and self-isolation of teachers and the impact and cost involved was causing huge challenges for delivery of learning. We must minimise the harms from both COVID and the measures used to fight it. And so does my right honourable friend agree that as soon as possible we need to use targeted testing to support teachers, change and improve our approach to contact tracing in schools, to stop whole year groups having to self-isolate following a case, so that our schools can continue to provide the learning and opportunities our children deserve?
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend is absolutely right to raise the importance of testing in schools, testing teachers, and making sure that we don't send whole bubbles home. And that's why schools and universities, along with NHS, hospitals and care homes, are one of the primary settings in what we want, where we want to roll out, and not just PCR testing, but lateral flow testing as well.
This is very grateful to the Prime Minister for giving such full and thorough answers and really listening to what people are saying. But I will forgive him if, in spite of colleagues giving ridiculously long questions, the Prime Minister feels like giving shorter answers.
I'm very happy to do so, Madam Deputy Speaker. I just don't want to shortchange colleagues. Since I was banished by telecommunications from your presence, I don't want people to think I'm trying to nickel and dime you here.
It is much more difficult for the Prime Minister, since he can't feel the atmosphere here in the chamber. So it's better that I explain to him that both his Secretary of State and the Leader of the Opposition look as if they agree with the point that I've just made. Christian Matheson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And of course, the hope that we have been given by our brilliant scientists will be dashed for millions if the Prime Minister pushes ahead with a public sector pay freeze, which of course is not levelling up, that's levelling down, and he doesn't want to be accused of saying one thing and doing another. So will he give a very short answer now and rule out the possibility of a public sector pay freeze?
Prime Minister.
Well, I think he should wait until the Chancellor's statement on Wednesday.
Paul Holmes.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I welcome the Prime Minister's statement and the clarity that he's given, but there are 4 independent tap shop and breweries in my constituency who have gone through a terrible time with only being allowed to sell takeaways very late in the day. Will the Prime Minister look with the Chancellor at extending business rate relief to these businesses and bespoke new grants to this industry?
I refer my honourable friend, the answer I gave just now.
Andrew Gwynn.
Thank you. I welcome much in the Prime Minister's statement. Thankfully, Greater Manchester is seeing a downward trend in infections in all 10 boroughs. But we will have been in some form of restrictions now for 4 months. Clearer rules and better enforcement are welcome, but I still don't understand the logic of pushing people out of COVID-secure, well-regulated, responsible hospitality businesses into illegal COVID-insecure gatherings to drink. That would be counterproductive, wouldn't it?
Prime Minister.
Yes, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Prime Minister, I welcome the change that will allow people in care homes to be visited by 2 members of their family who will be tested twice a week. Can he ensure that care homes promote visiting and that there is a register that really calls out those care homes that do not allow it?
Prime Minister.
Well, I think care homes should follow their own instincts about the well-being of their residents, and they should follow all the procedures that we've set out and make use of lateral flow testing and other types of protection to ensure that people can see their loved ones and hug them. And that's what I think the people of this country want, and I know many families across the country want to see, and that's what this government is providing for.
Dame Diana Johnson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, Hull has had the highest COVID infection rates in the United Kingdom. And 2 weeks ago, Hull was promised 10,000 lateral flow tests, but today they still have not arrived. So when governing during a global pandemic, shouldn't the Prime Minister focus on delivering on the ground what has already been announced, rather than on grand new promises lifted from the Downing Street PR grid?
Prime Minister.
Well, I will take up immediately the point she makes about Hull and try to understand why they haven't got the lateral flow tests that she rightly wants to see.
Ben Bradley.
Deputy Speaker, Nottinghamshire went into Tier 3 just a few days before the national lockdown. It was a very stressful few days for the beauty industry in Nottinghamshire, which was uniquely forced to close, unlike any other Tier 3 area in the country. Given that the premise of this tiered regional system was to have consistent and fair restrictions across each tier across the country, can you assure me that we'll seek to avoid these kind of irregularities under these new restrictions to avoid the upset that was felt by beauticians and make sure this is fair for small businesses?
Prime Minister.
Yes, we will indeed, and as I said in my statement, we'll make sure that there's much more uniformity about the way we do things.
Zara Sultana.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last week, the Health Secretary told Good Morning Britain, and I quote, "We don't have parking charges in English hospitals for NHS staff, and we're not going to for the course of the pandemic." But this isn't true, because they were reintroduced for staff at University Hospital Coventry and Warwickshire in June, as they have elsewhere. I've written to the Prime Minister about this matter, so now I ask him, will he live up to the government's promise of free parking throughout the pandemic for NHS staff in Coventry and across the country?
Prime Minister.
I will look into the matter that the honourable lady raises and get back to it as soon as I can.
Angela Richardson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that by protecting NHS capacity during this autumn surge in cases, including at the Royal Surrey Hospital in my constituency, and investing £3 billion into reducing wait times, increasing treatments and mental health care, that this government is taking a balanced approach to all health needs?
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and it is a balanced approach that we're going to have to continue to follow through to the spring.
Rachel Hopkins.
Deputy Speaker, Luton Airport supports thousands of jobs and also provides an income stream that funds both council services and local charities. Will the Prime Minister outline what plans the government has to introduce fast air passenger testing regime to prevent further job losses, restore consumer confidence and ensure that local voluntary sector survives?
Prime Minister.
She raises an excellent point, and I direct her to the answer I gave a few minutes ago about the statement that will shortly be made by my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Transport.
Now we go to Clive Efford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Local authorities have stepped up to the mark to tackle COVID in their areas, but facing additional costs of local track and trace whilst losing income from taxes and fees. So can the Prime Minister ensure that and give us an undertaking that local government will be recognised in the current spending review, and that there will be extra resources so that they can pay for the extra services that they're required to provide?
Minister.
Thank local government for everything they're doing. I think they're doing an amazing job in incredibly difficult circumstances, and he can be sure that they will be recognised in the spending review.
Can my right honourable friend the Prime Minister confirm that decisions over tiering will be based upon local authority areas like Stockport rather than wider combined authority areas like Greater Manchester?
Prime Minister.
I thank my honourable friend. I can confirm that we will be taking decisions about tiering on the basis of the data and a commonsensical division of the areas concerned.
To Scotland, to Marion Fellows.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In a recent survey, 95% of disabled people said that their costs had increased even further as a result of the pandemic, with no £20 uplift to their legacy benefits. Will the Prime Minister listen to the Social Security Advisory Committee, the Work and Pension Select Committee, cross-party MPs and peers, and those who signed the Don't Leave Disabled People Behind petition? And please take action to end this injustice.
Minister.
Study the point that she makes, though. Obviously, I'm proud that we've been able to uplift universal credit by £1,000 a year, helping some of the poorest families across the country, and of course helping the disabled as well.
Now we go to Sir David Evanet.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Families and businesses in Bexleyheath and Crayford will share my strong support for my right honourable friend's statement and approach today. However, we have a thriving hospitality sector that has particularly suffered this year because of the necessary restrictions to control the spread of coronavirus. While safety remains a top priority, does my right honourable friend agree that the hospitality sector is the backbone of our local town centres, and it's vital we continue to provide them with the support they need to help survive and protect jobs?
Minister.
Indeed, and I've been with my honourable friend to many a fantastic hospitality venue in Bexley, and I seem to remember going with him to one pub where he christened a blue drink the Bexley Breeze Block, I think it was, from memory. And let's hope that we're able to get the hospitality sector going across the country in the way we all want, so that those fantastic businesses can recover strongly in the new year. But we're going to do that by the techniques that I've mentioned: tough tiering, mass testing, and rolling out a vaccine.
And now we go to Carla Lockhart.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister will be aware of the positive role that churches play in our society and the importance of that act of public worship for so many. Churches across the UK are now closed, but I note the intention to reopen them soon in England. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that the role of churches as we live with COVID cannot be underestimated or undervalued, and that we should be looking at opening our churches again right across the United Kingdom? But also, does he recognise that as we deal with the legacy of lockdown, churches have a key role to play in supporting what is a broken land and a broken people?
I think I might quarrel with her description of a broken land and a broken people, because I think actually the people of this country have shown fantastic resilience. I don't think that they or we are broken. I think that we're going to come back very strongly. But I also think that churches play an enormous part in that, and I'm glad that they're going to be reopening from next week.
Jonathan Gullis.
Madam Deputy Speaker, my right honourable friend will know that while Stoke-on-Trent may be a small city, it is a mighty one, and having removed itself from government attention over rising coronavirus figures twice this year, the city is once again showing its hardy spirit in pushing down case rates during the second wave by 100 per 100,000 cases in the last week. So will my right honourable friend consider the approach made today by Stoke-on-Trent City Council leader, Councillor Abby Brown, in placing Stoke-on-Trent into Tier 2 as we exit this national lockdown?
Prime Minister.
Well, my honourable friend is so right in the way he champions Stoke and the community spirit of people of Stoke, and I can't say which tier they will, alas, will go into. It will depend on all the things that I've discussed, and the figures are not easy, and the incidence of the virus is still high, and we have to face that grim truth, I'm afraid. But the hope is there that with mass testing, and the people of Stoke can do this if they choose. You can drive down the incidence, you can drive down the R, you can find the asymptomatic positives, and you can reduce the virus in your area. And if you can reduce the virus in your areas, Liverpool has done by about 2/3, partly thanks to participation of the people of Liverpool in mass testing, then you've got the prospect of removing those restrictions as well. So get a test to kick COVID out is what I would also say to the people of Stoke, in addition to thanking them, thanking you for all their hard work.
Justin Maddis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Those areas that are placed in Tier 3 will be keen to get any help that they can receive to get themselves out of it. So, with reference to the mass testing in Liverpool, can the Prime Minister tell us how many of the numbers in reductions in infections can be directly attributed to the mass testing scheme there, and actually what level of population buy-in is needed for that system to be effective?
Prime Minister.
It's an incredibly good question. I mean, Liverpool, in the end, I think they're up to 37% or more of their population has now been tested, and a lot of asymptomatic positives have been found. I've got to stress, it's not the only thing. It can make a big difference, but it's probably to be absolutely certain that it's really playing a decisive part in getting the R down. You need a bigger proportion of the population to do it. You need more community buy-in, but that's why we're working with local leaders across the areas that may be going into Tier 3 to help them with that and to get mass testing programs going, not just like Liverpool, but even more ambitious.
Now we go to Dudley, to Marco Longhi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Will my right honourable friend join me in praising all our care workers, our staff at Russell's Hall Hospital in Dudley, but in particular staff at the Barchester Broadway Halls Care Home, who went out of their way to enable residents Stan Plowetsky, aged 94, and Myra Stays, aged 87, to be part of our Armistice Day commemorations at this very difficult time.
Prime Minister.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right to pay tribute to the work of those remarkable staff for what they did to allow Remembrance Sunday commemorations to go ahead, allow people to attend them. I thank them personally, and I thank all care home staff for the unbelievable service they have given and are continuing to give.
Brennan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does he agree there have been very positive discussions with the devolved administrations, including Wales, about a joined-up Christmas? But can he do something about the terminal incontinence of the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster in continuing to leak the details of this discussion, undermining the trust and respect needed for those discussions to succeed?
Prime Minister.
What I can certainly say is that it doesn't help to read about confidential discussions in the papers. I must say a lot of the stuff I've read seems to me to be very wide of the mark. But I'm grateful, obviously, to all the colleagues in the DAs for the cooperation that they're showing and the work we're doing together.
Natalie Elphick.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Will the Prime Minister join me in congratulating all those arts venues, like the Astor Theatre in Deal, churches and parish halls who have opened their COVID-secure doors to help others during the pandemic, and encourage such kindness and neighbourly behaviour to continue as we tackle the virus together across the nation?
Prime Minister.
I do indeed congratulate all the arts venues in Deal who have pulled together in the way that she describes, and let's hope that we can get them all fully open as soon as possible, so that they can enjoy the benefits of a new deal for Deal. or an even better deal for deal that I'm sure my honourable friend is championing.
My constituents in Hampstead and Kilburn are excited about seeing their families over Christmas, but also nervous about putting their elderly relatives at risk. Would the Prime Minister consider using the expanded testing capacity to allow families to get a COVID test ahead of visiting elderly relatives at Christmas, even if they don't have symptoms?
Prime Minister.
That is certainly one of the use cases that we are considering, whether it's possible to roll that out across the whole country in time for Christmas. That may be difficult, but she'll have heard what we're doing with those types of tests in care homes to allow people to see their loved ones.
Craig Williams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Prime Minister and welcome the return of the local approach, something I hope the devolved administrations, in particularly in Wales, will copy. And can I pay particular tribute to Powys County Council and the track and test team that have contributed massively both to the local and national effort. What they and my constituents want for Christmas, Prime Minister, is a united approach across the United Kingdom. And to please my own member for Cardiff West, will he, as the Prime Minister for the whole of the United Kingdom, announce that?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can certainly say that we're going to, I hope very much to have a united approach, and I have no to Christmas, and I think that's what the people of this country want to see. And I repeat that there is much more that unites us than divides us when it comes to these issues that matter so greatly to the hearts of everybody in our country. We're working together, and we'll, I think, come up with a good solution.
Now we go to Oxford, to Leila Moran.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As an Oxford MP, may I echo the Prime Minister in congratulating the Oxford Vaccine Group for today's fantastic news? And will he join me in further congratulating them on being shortlisted for the NHS Parliamentary Awards? As chair of the all-party group on coronavirus, we've repeatedly heard in the course of our inquiry from experts and scientists who are concerned that a prospective vaccine, as welcome as it may be, is in of itself not an exit strategy. Will the Prime Minister meet with me and a cross-party delegation of both houses to discuss our forthcoming recommendations so that we can create a COVID-secure UK that includes testing at the borders and locally led test, trace and isolate systems?
And she's entirely right about the vaccine. It's wonderful news, but it's absolutely premature to say that it constitutes on its own an exit strategy. That's why I've insisted throughout this afternoon that it must be accompanied by NHS test, trace and isolate, but also new types of testing, plus the tough tiering that we have had and will have in place when we come out of this lockdown. And the way forward is to make those things work together, make the tiering work in tandem with the testing so that people get a test with a view to reducing the restrictions under which you are living. Get a test and help to kick COVID out. That's the way forward.
And finally, the prize for patience and perseverance to ask question number 100, Jason McCartney.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With a case rate of 552 per 100,000 and the 6th highest case rate in England, I think many people expect Kirklees to be in the highest tier when they're announced on Thursday. And of course, that will mean the closure of hospitality, apart from takeaways. This comes at a time of the year when many cafes, bars, pubs and restaurants try to make their profits to see them through the rest of the year. So can I please end this session by asking the Prime Minister just one more time, please will he speak to the Chancellor again about support for the supply chain for hospitality, support for breweries and cider producers, look again at grant funding, and can they please consider once again cancelling business rates for another year to support our hospitality businesses?
Prime Minister.
Well, my honourable friend makes a passionate plea for breweries, for cider producers and others. I know that my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, is going to be listening very keenly to all that, the points he made, particularly about business rates and other measures. we want to support the hospitality industry in Kirklees and across the country.
I thank the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State for answering 100 questions and bringing the House up to date with plans. Thank you.
Point of order.
Now, first point of order, Matt Weston.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for granting me a point of order. Madam Deputy Speaker, if you could help me on this matter, I'd really appreciate it. On the 15th of June, in response to my written question regarding laptop provision for schools, the Minister for School Standards said the Department for Education had ordered over 200,000 laptops for schools on the 19th of April. On the 2nd of July, here in the Chamber, I asked the Secretary of State for Education why documents released by his own department therefore suggested the first order was in fact placed on the 15th of May. The Secretary of State responded, "I will write to the Honourable Gentleman with clarification on that matter." He failed to write to me. I asked the same question to the Secretary of State in the House of Commons on the 1st of September. He said, "I will write to him with reference to that if he will be so gracious as to accept a letter." He failed to do so again. I followed this up with his department on the 2nd of November. They failed to reply. I followed this up again with his department on the 19th of November. I received a holding email, but am yet to receive a substantive response. Will you, Madam Deputy Speaker, please advise me, what steps do I need to take to secure a response from the Secretary of State for Education, given he first promised to write to me almost 5 months ago?
Although the Honourable Gentleman's point is not a point of order for the Chair, because the Chair, of course, does not have responsibility for what ministers say or write or don't say or don't write. Nevertheless, I understand the Honourable Gentleman's purpose in raising his point of order in the Chamber at this moment, and I can say to him, as Mr. Speaker has said on many occasions, that ministers ought to reply to questions and letters from members of Parliament in a timely fashion, and that the saga that he has just described is not acceptable. And although I can't deal with it from the Chair as a point before the Chamber now, I can say that I hope that the matter has been noted by the Treasury bench and hopefully also by the Leader of the House's office, and that the Honourable Gentleman will receive his answer soon. Thank you. Point of order, Chris Bryant.
Madam Deputy Speaker, you were not in the chair last week when I made the longest point of order that has ever been made in the history of points of order, for which I apologise. But at that time, I suggested that the government had tabled its motion on virtual participation in debates and who should be allowed to take part in those at the very last moment and without notifying the opposition. Now, the Leader of the House has written to me to clarify that he had in fact been in touch with the Shadow Leader of the House, and so that channel had been open, and I should have been, so I want to correct the record, I should have been much more precise in saying that the Government Whip's office had not notified the Opposition Whip's office. I do apologise to the House. I just wonder, therefore, Madam Deputy Speaker, whether the process that I have used for correcting the record would also be available for the Leader of the House, because he said last week that the reason he was tabling his motion in the way that he did was that the government rule was go to work if you can, i.e. physically. Whereas in actual fact, this afternoon, the Prime Minister has made it absolutely clear that even if we're in Tier 1, the rule is work from home if you can.
Well, I note that the Honourable Gentleman has now made the second longest point of order.
I'm going for a record.
I'm quite sure he'll make the third longest before long. But I appreciate the point that the Honourable Gentleman is making, and it is quite in order since he has realised that something he said in this chamber was factually incorrect, that he should come to the chamber and correct it, and I'm grateful to him for doing so. As to whether the Leader of the House will consider that he is in a similar position is a matter for him and not for me. Thank you. We will now suspend the House for 3 minutes in order to allow the safe exit of honourable members and entrance of honourable members for the next item of business. Order. Order.